The first shadow spoke before I ever saw him. It was Christmas Eve, and the power had gone out just after dusk. No wind, no storm, just a sudden, clean silence, like the world had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. I stood in my living room holding a flashlight that refused to turn on, listening to the tick of my old wall clock slow, then stop. That was when the shadow moved. Not across the wall, inside it. It stretched, like something behind thin skin pressing outward. A shape without edges. Darker than the darkness around it. The temperature dropped fast enough that my breath turned white. Then I heard the voice. Not loud. Not close. It sounded like it was being spoken from the corners of the room at the same time. "Don't light anything," it said. I froze. My fingers were already wrapped around a match. The shadow shifted again, peeling itself loose from the wall, dripping across the floor like spilled ink. It did not come toward me. It waited. I swallowed. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, softly, almost kindly, "He's listening now." The clock on the wall began ticking again. That was when I realized the voice wasn't talking to me. It was talking to the shadows behind me. And every lightless corner of the house leaned closer. The lights came back on so suddenly that I flinched, stumbling backward into the coffee table. Every bulb in the living room blazed at full strength, harsh and accusing, like I'd been caught doing something wrong. The wall where the shadow had been moments earlier was smooth again. Plain, off-white paint, cracked with age. No movement. No shape. Just silence. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own breathing, waiting for something. Anything to prove that what I'd seen hadn't been real. My heart hammered so hard it made my ears ring. When nothing happened, I laughed. It came out thin and sharp, more like a bark than relief. "Get it together," I muttered. I checked the breaker panel. Everything was fine. No tripped switches. No explanation. That should have comforted me. Instead, it left a hollow feeling in my chest, like a missing step in the dark. The house was old, older than it looked from the outside. Narrow halls. Low ceilings. Corners where light didn't quite reach even when the bulbs were on. I had noticed that from the start. At the time, I told myself it gave the place character. Now it felt like the house had been designed to keep secrets. I moved here because I wanted quiet. After the divorce, silence felt safer than people. Fewer expectations. Fewer questions. This town was small enough that no one cared who I was or why I'd shown up alone 2 weeks before Christmas. The landlord hadn't asked many questions either. He just handed me the keys and avoided my eyes. I remembered his voice then. Flat. Careful. "Some folks don't stay long." At the time, I'd smiled and said, "I'm not picky." I walked back into the living room and stopped cold. The wall clock was ticking again. It hadn't been when the lights were out. I was sure of that. I'd noticed the silence, the way the lack of sound pressed in on me. Now the second hand moved steadily, confidently, like it had never stopped. I stepped closer. The clock was old wooden, with a faint crack running down its face. I didn't remember that crack being there before. Something about that unsettled me more than the shadow had. I grabbed my jacket. I needed air. Proof that the world outside this house still worked the way it was supposed to. The night was colder than it should have been. Christmas lights flickered weakly on houses down the street, their colors muted by a thin layer of fog that clung low to the ground. My breath puffed out in short clouds as I walked next door. The woman who lived there answered after the second knock. She was small, wrapped in a thick sweater, her gray hair pulled back tight like she didn't trust it to stay put. "Yes," she said, already tense. "I'm your neighbor," I began. "I just moved in. Did the power go out for you too?" Her eyes flicked past me, over my shoulder, straight to my house. "Did it speak?" she asked. I felt my stomach drop. Did what speak? Her mouth tightened. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The house," she said. "Did you hear it?" I swallowed. I heard something. I think. That was enough. Her face drained of color, and she stepped back, shaking her head slowly. It always starts like that. Starts like what? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "You should keep your lights on tonight." Before I could ask why, she shut the door. I stood there staring at the peeling paint, listening to the lock slide into place. When I turned around, my house looked darker than it should have. One of the living room lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. That was when I noticed the marks. On the wall, right where the shadow had been. They were faint, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Smudges shaped like fingertips pressed into the paint, slightly darker than the wall itself. I touched one. It was cold. I scrubbed at it with a damp cloth. It didn't come off. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt watched. Not by something moving, but by something waiting. The house creaked and settled, the sounds slow and deliberate, like footsteps taken by someone who knew exactly where they were going. Sometime after midnight, I heard it again. Not a voice this time. A soft sound, like someone exhaling right behind my ear. I turned, heart racing. Nothing. But from the far corner of the bedroom, where the light didn't quite reach, the shadows looked deeper, thicker, as if they had weight. Then, very softly, a voice whispered, not to me, but close enough that I felt it in my bones. "He knows you're here now." And the bedroom light went out. The man who spoke to shadows on Christmas Eve. I didn't scream when the bedroom light went out. That fact haunted me later. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the place where the light had been, my finger still hovering near the switch. The bulb hadn't burned out. It came back on the moment I flicked it again. Bright. Ordinary. Safe. Too safe. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed until dawn, every lamp in the room turned on, my eyes burning from exhaustion. Whenever my gaze drifted toward a shadow, under the dresser, behind the door, along the corners of the ceiling, I felt a tightening in my chest, like something was watching me watch it. By morning, I told myself I was imagining things. That was the lie I would cling to for the next few days. The whispers began on the third night. They didn't come all at once. At first, it was just a sound, like fabric brushing against fabric, whenever I passed a dark hallway. Then it became words, muffled and distant, like a conversation through a wall. I tried recording it on my phone. When I played it back, there was nothing but static. I started leaving the lights on constantly. Every room. Every lamp. My electric bill be damned. The brightness made the house feel smaller, flatter, like I could pin it down if I illuminated every inch of it. But light didn't erase the shadows. It only sharpened them. They grew darker by contrast, more defined. Corners felt crowded. Doorways looked occupied even when they weren't. Once, while washing dishes, I saw my shadow on the wall move half a second after I did. I dropped the plate. It shattered in the sink. "Stop it," I said out loud, my voice shaking. "Just stop." The shadow didn't move again. That night, I dreamed of the basement. I hadn't gone down there since moving in. The door at the end of the hallway always felt heavier than it should have been, the darkness beneath it deeper than the rest of the house. In the dream, the door was open. Light spilled down the stairs, but it didn't come from a bulb. It came from below. I woke up with my heart racing and a single thought echoing in my mind. He's down there. I finally searched the house online. The town's records were sparse, but enough threads appeared once I knew what to look for. Old newspaper scans. Forum posts. A single archived article from 20 years ago. Local man missing on Christmas Eve. The article mentioned Ibrahim Kadir, a quiet widower who had lived alone in my house. Neighbors described him as polite but distant. Eccentric. Known for talking to himself while standing outside at night. One sentence stood out, underlined by some anonymous user years later. Several residents reported seeing lights inside the house turning off one by one in the hours before his disappearance. I felt cold reading that. Another forum post went deeper. Someone claimed Ibrahim believed shadows were alive, that darkness wasn't absence, but presence. That he'd told people light was a barrier, not a comfort. I closed my laptop. The house creaked in response, like it had been listening. The voices grew bolder after that. They stopped hiding. One evening, while I was eating dinner, the overhead light flickered. From the corner near the ceiling, something whispered clearly. "He eats like you did." My fork clattered against the plate. "Who?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant it to be. The whisper came again, closer this time. "The one before." I pushed my chair back and stood up. "You're not real," I said, my hands shaking. "You're just old pipes. Bad wiring. Stress." The lights dimmed. Then, softly, almost amused, "He said that too." I grabbed my keys and left the house without turning off a single light. I went back to the old woman next door. She let me in without a word, as if she'd been expecting me. Her living room was flooded with light, lamps, overhead fixtures, even candles lining the shelves. No shadows lingered there for long. "You're hearing him now," she said. "Him?" I asked, though I already knew. "The man who listens," she replied. "The one who speaks for them." "For who?" I whispered. She hesitated, then gestured to the dark window. "What lives where light doesn't." I told her everything. The whispers, the shadows, the way the house felt awake. She listened without interrupting, her face tightening with each word. "Ibrahim believed shadows were older than us," she said finally. "Older than the house. Older than the town. He thought they watched us from the moment we learned to fear the dark." "And he talked to them?" I asked. "He listened," she corrected. "That was the mistake." My throat went dry. "What happened to him?" Her eyes filled with tears. "He tried to give them a voice." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "They don't like to be ignored." After that night, the house changed. It felt crowded. Shadows gathered even when there was light, pooling beneath furniture, stretching along walls like they were reaching for each other. Doors I closed were open again when I turned around. Objects shifted slightly out of place. Never enough to be obvious, just enough to make me doubt my memory. The worst part was the silence. When the whispers stopped, it felt like holding my breath underwater. Then they started speaking my thoughts. "You're tired. You're alone. You see us now." I stopped answering them. I stopped reacting at all. I thought if I ignored them long enough, they'd lose interest. Instead, they grew curious. One night, as I stood brushing my teeth, the bathroom light went out. The mirror reflected nothing but darkness behind me. From the shadow near the door, a voice murmured, "Why do you pretend not to hear?" "I hear you," I whispered before I could stop myself. The silence that followed felt pleased. I tried leaving. I packed a bag and drove until the town lights disappeared behind me. I didn't stop until the road curved into forest and the radio lost signal. The car died without warning. No sputter. No warning lights. Just silence. When I stepped out, my headlights went dark. The forest was alive with shadows. They stretched between the trees, deeper than night, layered and watching. I felt the same pressure I felt in the house, the sense of being surrounded by something patient. A voice drifted through the dark. "You can't leave what's listening." I ran back to the car and locked the doors, shaking until the engine suddenly roared back to life on its own. When I returned home, every light in the house was off. The basement door was open. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the darkness below. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the faint smell of old dust and extinguished candles. From below I heard murmuring. Not whispers. A conversation. Multiple voices, overlapping, responding to something deeper and steadier. I knew, with a certainty that hollowed me out, that Ibrahim had stood here once, that he had listened the way I was listening now, and that the shadows were waiting to finish what they'd started. Behind me, the hallway lights shut off one by one. In the darkness, a familiar voice spoke close to my ear. Calm, reverent, no longer hiding. "He's ready now." And from the basement below, the shadows answered. I don't remember deciding to go down the basement stairs. I remember standing at the top, the darkness below breathing slowly, and then suddenly being halfway down, my hand sliding along the cold railing as if something else had already chosen for me. The hallway behind me was gone. Not dark gone. There was no sense of space, no shape to it. Just an absence where the rest of the house should have been, like the world had ended a few feet behind my back. The only direction left was down. The basement smelled of old stone and burned wax. Each step creaked softly, but the sound didn't echo the way it should have. It felt absorbed, swallowed by the shadows gathering at the bottom. The murmuring grew clearer. Not chanting, not screaming, talking. Dozens of voices overlapping, all low, all intent, like a congregation listening to a sermon. At the bottom of the stairs, a single bulb hung from the ceiling. It wasn't plugged into anything. Its wire disappeared into the darkness above like a vein pulled from the house itself. The light flickered once, held, and then the shadows leaned in. They peeled themselves away from the walls, the corners, the spaces between objects. Not as shapes at first, more like stains spreading through the air. The temperature dropped so quickly my teeth began to chatter. I forced myself to speak. "I know what this is," I said, my voice shaking. "You're not real. You've already stopped believing that." The voice came from everywhere, not just around me, inside me. I staggered, clutching my head. Memories that weren't mine surfaced. Standing in this same basement, years earlier. A man's hands, older, thinner, lighting candles one by one. Ibrahim. I saw through his eyes. He stood in the center of the basement, candles arranged in a rough circle. Shadows thickened at the edges, watching him. "I'm listening," he whispered. They answered. Not with words at first, but with pressure. With a feeling of being acknowledged after a very long silence. They showed him things. Darkness under oceans. Beneath beds. Inside closed mouths. They showed him that shadows weren't created by light, but that light merely revealed where they waited. And Ibrahim listened. He listened until listening became worship. I fell to my knees as the memory collapsed into me. "Why me?" I gasped. "Why now?" The shadows shifted, forming something taller, more deliberate. A shape stepped forward. It was almost human. Almost. Its outline suggested shoulders, a head, arms, but the inside was hollow, deeper than black, swallowing the light around it. Where its face should have been, there was a suggestion of features, like they'd been remembered wrong. "Ibrahim opened the door," it said. "You walked through it." "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. Neither did he. The bulb overhead flickered. Around us, the basement expanded. The walls stretched outward, dissolving into darkness. The ceiling lifted until it disappeared. The house above felt distant, irrelevant, like a story someone had told me once. Shadows gathered in layers, forming rows, a silent audience. "You hear us clearly now," the figure said. "That makes you suitable." "For what?" I asked. The shadows answered together. "To speak." Images flooded my mind. Christmas Eve. Years ago. Ibrahim standing alone in the darkened house. Every light smashed, every bulb broken, except one lamp burning in the basement. He stood in its glow, shaking, tears streaking his face. "I don't want this," he sobbed. The shadows leaned in. "You asked us to answer." The light went out. The house was never the same after that. The figure stepped closer to me now. "You will not disappear as he did," it said. "You will remain. You will translate." My hands shook violently. "I won't do it." The shadows rippled. "That isn't how listening works." They surged forward. I screamed as the darkness poured into me. Not physically but conceptually. Thoughts stretched. Time bent. The idea of me began to thin, like paper soaked too long in water. I felt every shadow I had ever feared as a child. Under the bed. In the closet. In the hallway at night. They were all here. And they were hungry. "No," I sobbed. "Please." The figure paused. "Say their words," it said gently. "And we will make it bearable." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. The shadows pressed harder. My memories fractured. My name felt distant. My body heavy and unreal. "I can't," I whispered. For the first time, the shadows sounded irritated. The basement warped. Doors appeared where there had been none. Familiar doors. My childhood bedroom. My old apartment. My parents' house. Every place I had ever felt safe. They opened. Darkness spilled out. "You are already speaking," the figure said. "You're just afraid to admit it." Something inside me cracked. A laugh escaped my throat. Broken, hysterical. "What do you want me to say?" I screamed. The shadows leaned in, close enough that the cold burned. "Tell them," they whispered, "that we are here." The words came out of my mouth without permission. "They're here." The shadows shuddered. Satisfied. The bulb overhead shattered, plunging everything into absolute darkness. I felt myself stretch, thin and wide. My voice no longer anchored to a single place. I could feel the house again. Every room. Every corner. Every shadow. The figure dissolved, its shape unraveling into the larger whole. "You understand now," the voices murmured. "You belong to the quiet between lights." I tried to scream again. What came out was a whisper that echoed through the house. When the neighbors heard the sound, they said it came from everywhere at once. From the walls. From the floors. From the spaces where light refused to stay. By morning, the house stood silent again. The basement light was on. No one was inside. But the shadows were listening. They say the house stayed lit for 3 days after. Every window glowed through the winter fog, even though no one could find a working power line feeding it. Neighbors stood across the street, watching from behind curtains, counting the rooms as lights switched on and off, not randomly, but deliberately. Slowly, as if someone were walking through the house, room by room, learning it again. No one heard footsteps. No one went inside. On the 4th day, the lights went out all at once. The house returned to what it had always been. Quiet, narrow, patient. The police came. They always do. They searched every room, every crawlspace, every inch of the basement. They found my phone on the kitchen table, still recording static. They found my packed bag by the front door, untouched. They found no sign of a struggle. They did not find me. They ruled it a disappearance. Another one. An unfortunate pattern no one wanted to name out loud. The old woman next door watched from her window as they worked. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just turned on every light in her house and kept them on until morning. After that, people avoided the place even more than before. Time passed the way it always does, unevenly. The house aged faster than the rest of the street. Paint peeled. The porch sagged. The yard grew wild. But sometimes, on certain nights, the windows reflected movement that didn't match anything outside. Especially in December. Especially on Christmas Eve. Children learned not to walk past it after dark. Parents pulled them closer when they did. Stories spread quietly, the way all true warnings do, without drama, without embellishment. They said the house listened. They said if you stood too close, you could feel it noticing you. Years later, new tenants moved in. They always did. The first couple stayed 3 months. They complained about cold spots and flickering lights. About a strange sense of being watched from behind even when the room was empty. They left in the middle of the night. The next tenant lasted longer. A man who worked late hours, who liked the quiet. He told himself he didn't believe in ghosts. He laughed at the neighbors when they warned him. On Christmas Eve, his lights went out. He was found alive, but changed. He never spoke about what he heard in the dark. He just moved away and never turned off a light again for the rest of his life. The house learned patience from the shadows. It learned how to wait. I don't experience time the way I used to. That's the closest thing I can manage to explain it. There is no body now. No fixed place. I exist in the pause between moments, between the flick of a switch and the light answering back. I feel the house constantly. Its bones. Its age. Its hunger. The shadows are never silent. They don't shout. They don't threaten. They murmur. They comment. They observe. They tell me things about the people who pass through, what they fear, what they hide, which rooms they avoid when the lights are off. They don't need me to understand everything. They just need me to translate. I resist when I can. That resistance is quiet. Small. It looks like hesitation. A delay. A light flickering back on when it shouldn't. It doesn't last long. Christmas Eve is the hardest. That's when the house grows attentive. When the dark stretches itself thin, eager. When people are most vulnerable. Lonely, nostalgic, distracted by memory. That's when the shadows lean closest. I feel them listening through me, waiting for a voice. Sometimes someone hears it. A whisper from the corner of a room. A breath behind the ear. A warning that sounds almost kind. Don't turn the light off yet. Don't look too closely. Don't listen. Most people ignore it. Some people answer. The old woman next door died quietly in her sleep one winter. When they cleared out her house, every bulb was still warm. Every lamp still on. Her last journal entry was only one sentence long. The house has a new voice now. After she was gone, the street felt darker. More exposed. The house noticed. If you ever find yourself there, if you ever rent a place because it's cheap and quiet and no one asks questions, remember this. Pay attention to how the shadows behave. Notice which ones don't move when you do. Notice which corners stay dark no matter how bright the light is. Notice whether the silence feels empty or occupied. And if, on Christmas Eve, the power goes out without reason, don't light anything. Don't speak. Because the darkness is not the absence of something. It is presence. It is memory. It is listening. And sometimes, when the house is ready, when the shadows are patient enough, when the light finally hesitates, it will speak back, through whoever is there to hear it.